Greetings, everyone, and welcome to The Frequency. I'm your host, Dee Barnes, and thank you for tuning in right here on the Black Star Network. Now, today we have another important conversation for you. It's sensitive matters, but it's a necessary discussion we're about to have, and it's about the erasure of women, especially when they have their contributions erased due to some traumatic event. All of a sudden, that traumatic event becomes the lightning rod for everything that they're about, which is not the case. Today, my special guest, I've been dying to have this sister on. She's one of my favorite people. She's an inspiration to me, actually. She's a former A&R director, and she's behind some of the most iconic music collabs you have heard. You know her work. You might not be familiar with her, but you know her work. And we're going to get into her whole history because I really wanted to platform her and discuss her legacy, because it seems like women always have to defend their legacy, especially in any industry, basically. But in particular, we're talking about the music industry. And trigger warning for everyone, we're going to get into some sensitive topics. So I just want everybody to be aware, because we will be dealing with things of rape culture in particular. So I got to bring in my sis. Thank you so much for your time, Drew Dixon.
Thank you for having me, Dee.
Yes.
I'll see you right back.
Virtual hug, and virtual flowers, because this is, I've been wanting to get you on for the longest. And what really prompted me immediately was watching you on Twitter have to defend your legacy. So we're gonna get into all of that. But first, I want to start at the beginning. Your influences, where you grew up. Let's start there, because I do know you're from DC, and let me tell you, between go-go music and Bad Brains, I need to know. So tell me.
Yes.
Tell me
first of all, just thank you for having me. Thank you for everything you do and everything you have done.
Oh,
it's an honor. It's an honor, really.
It's an honor for me.
Long before I even started answering phones, Jive Records, I was watching Pump It Up. So it's really an honor to be here with you.
Amazing.
I am from DC. I lived there for the first 17 years of my life. My parents also native Washingtonians. My mom actually was the first Black female mayor of a major city. She was the mayor of Washington, DC from 1991 to 1995. I went to Stanford. I decided I wanted to go west, try something different, push myself outside of my comfort zone. And it was an amazing experience. I don't think I would have chosen a career making rap records if I hadn't gone to a school that really cultivated and encouraged innovation and risk-taking. Stanford, where I was Black Student Union representative to student government. I was an South African issues sort of fellow. I focused on North Africa and the Middle East in terms of my major. So I've always been trying to figure out how to kind of add value and thread the needle as a Black woman in America in a very complicated and often hostile sort of historical context, right?
Right.
And when I was out there, I fell in love with West Coast hip hop, Too Short.
Right.
Now that I reflect on it as a 52-year-old woman, but I was bobbing my head to Too Short, Dell and the Funky Homo Sapien, all of that. Yep. But I'm also from DC, so I grew up listening to go-go music. But I was also an alternative head. So
yes,
when hip hop came out, it felt like the combination of what I loved about alternative music, which is that it was irreverent, it was lyrically dense,
right?
It was, very, intelligent, lots of wordplay, punchlines, but it also had the soundtrack of soul music, which I'd also grown up listening to. So it kind of combined a lot of what I loved in terms of music, and the rebellion and the political sort of piece of hip hop, early hip hop, spoke to my spirit as the daughter of a Black politician. So that's where I'm from. That's how I ended up falling in love with hip hop. When my mom was elected, I went to Howard for a semester, and I through parties, and I figured out that there was an industry behind the music I loved, and I wanted to be a part of it. So that's how it all started for me.
So that's what inspired you to get into the music industry? Or was it your love for music in general?
Well, it was my love for music, but I was I was a history major in college, and I thought I would go to law school, or I might even go into politics like my parents. But when hip hop happened, I realized this was maybe a more direct way to impact people and to make a difference by putting the microphone in the hands of young, talented geniuses with something to say. And it was kind of a combination of my desire to make a difference kind of in a political sense, but also my love for music. So hip hop kind of was my left turn from law school. So instead of going to law school, I was like, I'm going to go see if I can't make rap records. Let me try that first. So
it's interesting that you said young, talented genius, because that's how I view you coming into the industry and thinking about all your accomplishments. A young, talented genius with confidence, like sheer confidence and sheer will and drive. And that's something I feel too, that women, when we first step into it, we're, into whatever the calling is for us, we're present in the moment. We're driving, we're a driving force for ourselves, and we have no fear. We're fearless.
You know what I mean? And fear. But I did.
Right. Because we do it for the love.
I did it for love.
We did it for love. Same thing with me with when I hosted Pump It Up. I just did it for the love, wasn't thinking about the bigger picture and all of that. Okay, so what was the first thing that you put together? Like, what did you make happen?
It's crazy.
So much.
I answered phones for 18 months at a couple different companies, Jive Records, Warner Brothers Records, and then Empire Artist Management, where I worked with Premiere and Gangstar as a receptionist. Wow. And then my first not answering phones job was actually at Zomba Music Publishing, where I signed Nas to a publishing deal a couple months, either before or after, I can't remember, but it was the same year that he released Illmatic. So I gave Nas a publishing deal, and I gave Eric Sermon a publishing deal at Zomba. So I was already kind of in the mix, making it happen, trying to, give resources and opportunities to hip hop artists and producers. But from there, I got the job I really came to New York to get, which was doing A&R at one of the handful of rap labels that were really kind of at the top of the game. And obviously there was no more important label in hip hop, at least from my perspective at the time. So I was hired by Russell Simmons himself to do A&R when I was 3 years old in 1984. And one of the first jobs I was given to do was to type credits, not just type the credits, but to sort of double check work on Method Man's album To Cal, to make sure that all like the stack of papers that I had matched the credits and the samples that were cleared, and everything was lined up, and you would just sort of put it in a big rubber band and send it up to Polygram. So that was my job, which was, not really what I was supposed to do. I was technically hired to sort of make records, but I was like, look, I'm just happy to be in the building. I'm happy to be doing A&R something, even if it's A&R. So I was sitting there in my office with one working speaker, no window.
No way.
And I was listening to the Method Man album and checking the paperwork, and there were these interludes that I realize now in this Twitter battle that I just had aren't on the album anymore. So in the original track listing, Shorty, I'm there for you anytime you need me, for real, and your girl believe me, that was just an interlude. It's not an interlude now. They went back and they added a song called All I Need. That did not exist. Okay. So the idea that all I did was add Mary J. Blige, let me not get ahead of myself, is fiction. What is true is that there was just an interlude. There was no song called All I Need. There was no music behind Shorty, I'm there for you anytime you need me, for real, girl, it's me and your world, believe me. That was just an interlude. And I was like blown away. I was like, this is so beautiful. This is so selfless. And it's real love. It's a real relationship that he's describing, that Method Man was describing, love and partnership and mutual respect.
Mutual respect. When we come back, Drew tells us the whole story behind the Method Man featuring Mary J. Blige's classic hit, I'll Be There For You, You're All I Need to Get By. You don't want to miss it.
President Biden has delivered for Black America. More funding for Black entrepreneurs. Millions of new good-paying jobs. He's lowering the cost of medications and the cost of living. Joe Biden is delivering for us, and that's the facts.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it.
This is about covering us.
Invest in black-owned media.
Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks.
We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible.
Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
Back right here in the frequency with my special guest, Drew Dixon. And
what is true is that there was just an interlude. There was no song called All I Need. There was no music behind Shorty, I'm there for you anytime you need me. For real, girl, it's me in your world, believe me. That was just an interlude. And I was like blown away. I was like, this is so beautiful. This is so selfless. And it's real love. You know, it's a real relationship that he's describing, that Method Man was describing. Love and partnership and mutual respect.
Mutual respect.
In the vocabulary of hip hop. And I thought that was so touching and so important. And it's funny, when the HBO Max documentary On the Record came out, in which I tell the story, D'Angelo called me because I actually was living with D'Angelo when I first started. Sidebar.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah.
I love it.
Max. And he was making Brown Sugar.
Okay. And so the album hadn't even come out yet. Brown Sugar hadn't even come out. Okay.
He was still making Brown Sugar. We actually broke up sort of about halfway, maybe 2/3 of the way through Brown Sugar. And that's when he and Angie Stone hooked up. So I was pre-Angie. But, you know, we were living together. And he reminded me when he saw On the Record that I came home with that interlude and I kept playing it on a loop. I was like, this is so beautiful. This is so beautiful. And he told me, I forgot. He was like, Drew, your favorite line was the last line, you my nigga. You kept saying, not you're my bitch, you're my nigga. Like you're my
homie. You're my home. Yeah.
You know? And he reminded me of how excited I was about that interlude and that particular line. And so back in 1994, I hear this interlude. I call Russell. Russell didn't have an office in the building, so you had to like catch him wherever he was. The Bowery Bar, the car, you know, on the move. And I kept
fashion show, front row.
Exactly. All of that. So I kept telling him, this is too beautiful to just be an interlude. A lot of people skip the interludes. They don't hear the interludes most of the time, and they're going to miss this. And this is too beautiful to be lost. And he was like, Drew, there's nothing we can do. The album is already done. It's already been sent to Polygram. As you know, you sent it to Polygram. We can't change the track listing. And I just wouldn't let it go. And then I had the idea to call it a remix. Let's get, my idea was to make it a duet. And I actually said, I think Mary J. Blige would be perfect, but I don't know Mary, but I know Lauryn Hill. She's a friend of mine. And he was like, who the fuck is Lauryn Hill? So I was like,
you gotta be kidding me. Okay.
I'm not kidding. This is after the first Fugees album, but before the score. And when I said my friend Lauryn Hill might want to do the duet with Method Man, he literally was like, who the fuck is Lauryn Hill? In fact, I did a song with Lauryn back when I was at Def Jam that you can find on YouTube called The Perfect Match. It's a poem I wrote about D'Angelo that Lauryn sang in the studio when we were in.
Wait. Now you just blew my mind, because now that's the songwriting. That's songwriting. That's not just putting it together, not just the production, but wow. Well, it's called The Perfect Match?
It's called The Perfect Match. It's Lauryn Hill and this artist I signed at Def Jam called Kali Ranks. And Lauryn and Kali were going to do a record over The Perfect Match from School Days, that track. That was the idea. And we were in Battery, and Lauryn started freestyling, and I had my wizard where I'd written this poem. Wizards were like little electronic Rolodexes.
I remember that.
You could even hear like her bracelets, like she's scrolling through the wizard, and she starts singing. She created a melody, and she wrote the melody live to this poem. And then she started freestyling past the poem. But this, like, it's crazy because it was a poem I'd written about D'Angelo that was in my Wizard that Lauren sang to this track with this artist, Kylie Ranks, that I'd signed. So Lauren and I were friends like that, like to the point that she was in the lab making a record, you know, bless her, like just really one of the honors of my life and career is the time I've had, you know, working in and around her genius. And so I suggested Lauren to wrestle for the duet because I didn't know how to reach Mary J. And so then he was like, well, I don't know who that is, but if you can get Puffy to get Mary's vocals on this, then I will let you try it. I called Puffy. I left a message. I guess he told me to drop off the DAT, the little mini tape.
Yeah, I remember those. Yep.
With the interlude, which I hand delivered to Bad Boy Records on 19th. I left it with his assistant. And by the time I got back to my desk, Puffy had left me a voice message on my answering machine saying, Drew, this is incredible. I love this. You're right. I can call Mary, but here's my idea. So it was his idea to cover the Tammy Terrell Marvin Gaye song, You're All I Need to Get By. I called Puffy. He asked me to sing the Tammy Terrell part. He did the children's story beat. And he was like, this is my idea. Book Hit Factory, Studio A. And I was like, yo, done. And I booked it. And, you know, we got the, you know, whatever the, you know, we got it paid for.
Right.
And that's how that record came to be.
That is so incredible.
Is then I was so excited about it.
Wait. I want to hear the other part. I want to take a quick break. I'm going to take a quick break because this is amazing, especially you songwriting. That just blew my mind. We'll be back, you guys, on The Frequency right here on the Black Star Network.
On his first day in office, with the country in crisis, President Biden got to work for us. Cutting Black child poverty in half, more money for Black entrepreneurs, millions of new, good-paying jobs. He's lowered the cost of living and prescription drugs. But there's more to do. He gets it because we all deserve dignity, safety, respect, and a chance to do more than just get by, but to get ahead.
I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message.
I'm Faraji Muhammad, live from LA. And this is The Culture. The Culture is a two-way conversation. You and me. We talk about the stories, politics, the good, the bad, and the downright ugly. So join our community every day at 3 p.m. Eastern and let your voice be heard. Hey, we're all in this together. So let's talk about it and see what kind of trouble we can get into. It's The Culture, weekdays at 3, only on the Black Star Network.
Back right here on The Frequency with my special guest, Drew Dixon, and we're getting into the myth, the legendary myth of how You're All I Need. Is that the correct title? You're All I Need?
The title is I'll Be There For You.
I'll Be There For You, that's right.
Because that's the original record. It's I'll Be There For You, parens, You're All I Need to Get By.
And see, you know, me calling it You're All I Need. And that, I'm telling you, when I first heard that, that was just like, I felt the same way. Like, yo, this is like special. Beautiful. You know what I mean? He's talking about me. You know, first of all, it's Method Man. So who's not going to love that? It's Mary J. Blige. Who's not going to love that? And the fact that you were so young and so aware consciously of thinking about how to put this together. And I know it couldn't have been easy for you because number one, being a woman and trying to present that idea. I mean, did you get any pushback or, you know?
It took me like a month to get them to let me even try the idea. Russell told me no when I first played the interlude and said, this has to be a song. It should be a duet with Mary J. Blige. He was like, no, it's too late, Drew. It is a no. And I couldn't let it go. And I kept playing it at home. And I was like, I can't let this idea go. It's too special. And I just wouldn't back down. And finally, I came up with the idea because I was told it was too late to put it on the album track listing.
Right.
Said, what if we call it a remix and put it on the B-side of whatever the next single is? Then at least I can make it and it can get out in the world. And it doesn't have to be the album. We'll just call it a remix. And it was like, a remix of what? I'm like, I don't know. Don't worry about that part. And so that's when I called Puffy. Puffy recorded Mary's vocals. Puffy had the idea for her to sing the Tammy Terrell part of the Marvin Gaye duet, You're All I Need to Get By. Puffy put children's story under it. And then I was told, wait, we actually can't release this without RZA's permission because Method Man signed through RZA's production company. So then RZA heard it and said, okay, bet. Well, actually, that's not even what happened. Before RZA heard it, I had to sort of get the reels with just Mary's vocals without the track and bring him back to Def Jam. Leora played that for RZA and said it was just vocals, it wasn't a track. And then actually I would run back and forth every day for like a week, maybe more, between the Hit Factory where Puffy was working and Chung King, the old Chung King and the old Hit Factory. And I would have to rewind the reels after Puffy's sessions, which were generally at night because he was at Bad Boy during the day. RZA worked during the day usually. And so I would rewind the reels so that we could give them to RZA without him knowing at first that Puffy was actually not just making, recording the vocals on Mary, but he was producing the record. So the records were really kind of made at the same time with RZA initially only knowing it was Mary's vocals that Puffy was cutting. Right. And eventually both remixes were done, remixes of interludes. They're not really remixes, but that's what I suggested we call it. Right. And then they decided it was so good they were going to shoot a video to it, even though it was the B-side. They were going to go ahead and shoot the video to the B-side. And they shot the video to RZA's version, which is dope. They're both dope in my opinion, but also because it was RZA's production company. So they shot the video to the version that RZA produced, even though Puffy's was technically first. And then they went back later and added a track called All I Need, which is actually really not the original. It's actually technically that's the remix that came from the versions that Puffy and RZA did based on my idea. So I had based on your idea. And then I had to physically move the reels every day between the two studios. Like I did the legwork to get it done. You did the legwork, exactly. No assistant. No. You did it all. Okay, so but yeah, no, I did it all. And I did it all while surviving Russell Simmons. And that's the other part. I had to deal with him every day to get permission to try this idea. I had to deal with him every day to figure out how to navigate the whole RZA piece of it. And Russell was brilliant, is brilliant, incredible, creative. And so I, kind of watched him figure out how to find paths. And I was like, okay, I can do that. I have a path. How about this? How about we make it a remix? But I had to deal with him. He was harassing me. So I had to harass you because this was your boss. Yes. And he was the one also that hired you. He hired me and he was the only one who was listening to me and giving me shots to try my ideas. So I had to be around him enough to get the opportunity to take this interlude and turn it into the record that we all love now. But I had to do it while avoiding being alone with him, Right. I'd bring my friends or I would meet him in the restaurant or try to be around him in situations where I could get his attention. I could get him to focus, which really often was in person. That was the best version of him I was going to get in terms of him listening carefully to what I was saying. But also not being alone in any setting where I would feel like he would be even more appropriate than he had been verbally. So I was dodging those bullets, but pushing this idea. That's why it's so maddening when people try to suggest that this idea somehow was not mine. It was my idea. I fought for it. Exactly. While being harassed, and I physically moved the reels and suggested it be called a remix. I mean, all of it. And all of that. And then did you get your credit? I didn't get an A&R credit. I mean, a lot of people think I should have a producer credit because it was my idea. You should. That's what I was thinking. I have no credit. In the wiki, I'm not mentioned. There's a wiki for the song, and I'm not even mentioned. Until On the Record came out in 2020, this story was not even known. I mean, I would hear this story in Urban Outfitters with my kids, and I would be like, I helped, I'm the reason the song, they're like, Mom, stop. We're tired of stories. You don't even have any money. Girl, shut up. So I'm not, Mom, stop. And so, what's painful for me is that I was driven out of the industry by harassment and assault. And not only did I lose the career and the livelihood that I worked so hard to build for myself from the very bottom answering phones, I also was erased from the entire story. There were records that would come all the time. Maria, My Love Is Your Love, A Rose Is Still a Rose. I signed Q-Tip to a solo deal when he put out Vibrant Thing. I signed Brand Nubian to a Reunion album. I mean, I could go on, and I was erased, I A&R'd The Boy Is Mine. I A&R'd It's Not Right, But It's Okay. And I was just completely erased from the story of all of these records that I helped to make, largely by connecting people from my world, which is hip hop, to Clive Davis's world when I started working at Arista, so that these hip hop producers could work with major pop stars. And I was erased. I mean, my trauma was forgotten by everyone but me. My triumphs were forgotten by everyone but me. And it's been really painful to carry that and to just be so small because of someone else did.
Exactly. And I absolutely, first of all, I want to say I'm so sorry that, you even had to go through that. Women deal with that all the time, being harassed at work. My situation was similar, not so much harassed at work, but harassed on the job by artists, all the time, not taking me seriously. And then, and I tried to like cover up, wearing the most baggiest clothes ever, cutting my hair, just like trying to make myself look less feminine because I didn't want them to be distracted by that and focus on, what was happening. And none of that worked. I mean, they still saw a woman, they still saw something that they wanted to dominate. And I feel like that happens a lot where our legacies get erased and replaced by the trauma. And all of a sudden we become known for that thing. I take my story, for example, hosting the show Pump It Up, having the incident with Dre. No one talks about the show. They only talk about me in reference to that incident, which is why I want to, it's so unfair. And we're going to really break that down. I want to.
It's a whole separate trauma. It's a separate trauma. What happens to our career and the erasure of our talent and contribution is its own trauma in its own bucket.
Right.
There's the rape by Russell Simmons. There's the harassment I experienced later at Arista, which drove me from the music industry completely. But then there's the erasure of my contribution and the fact that I was their peer in terms of my ability. That's a trauma unto itself.
Right. Right. How did you manage that? How did you deal with it?
I thought I was dealing with it. And then now I look back and I'm healing and I'm realizing that I was just sort of sleepwalking. I left the industry. I went to business school. I got married. I had 2 kids. I came back briefly and ran John Legend's label. And actually during that 2-year period, I had the idea to call Kanye West and put him on American Boy. So
that was your idea.
Once again, like I hit, when I met John Legend, I mean, I actually tried to sign John. When I met him to talk about running his label, he played me Estelle's album, which was great, but he thought it was done. And I was like, I don't hear a single. And he was like, oh, there's the song called More Than Friends. That's the single. I was like, that's a really cool sort of top 20 R&B record, but that's not your John Legend. Like, come on, you got to, I worked for Clive. Like, we got to have 5 records that can compete in the top 10 of the Hot 100. And so I said, you call will.i.am, you call Swizzy, I'll call Wyclef, let's call our people and make a record that's really competitive. And that's how American Boy got made. And it was dope, but Estelle correctly felt it was too pop to be a single. Meanwhile, we were waiting for Kanye to do a record for her because Kanye and John met Estelle at the same time, actually, back in LA in the Grammys, whatever. Okay. And he always said, I'll make a record for you, once you have a deal. And so he was going to honor that, but he was busy. So I finally said, how about this? Instead of waiting for Ye to make a record, why don't we get him to spit 18 bars or 16 or 24, whatever, on American Boy? Because that's already a hit. It's just too pop. But if Kanye spits on it, we've solved 2 problems. We get Ye and we get this record that's already a hit. We move it and make it more hip hop. And Kanye agreed. And then I actually called my old assistant, Lesvia Castro, who was at Universal at that time doing marketing and promotions. She pulled up his schedule.
When we come back, what was Ye's Kanye schedule? And just how hard was it to get him on the track? Plus, the story behind Method Man's and Mary J. Blige's hit song, I'll Be There For You, You're All I Need to Get By, when we return right here on The Frequency on the Black Star Network.
President Biden has delivered for Black America. More funding for Black entrepreneurs. Millions of new good-paying jobs. He's lowering the cost of medications and the cost of living. Joe Biden is delivering for us, and that's the facts.
Back right here on The Frequency with my special guest, Drew Dixon.
I went to business school. I got married. I had 2 kids. I came back briefly and ran John Legend's label. And actually during that 2-year period, I had the idea to call Kanye West and put him on American Boy. You know,
so, that was your idea.
Once again, like I hit, you know, like when I met John Legend, I mean, I actually tried to sign John. When I met him to talk about running his label, he played me Estelle's album, which was great. But he thought it was done. And I was like, I don't hear a single. And he was like, oh, there's this song called More Than Friends. That's the single. I was like, that's a really cool sort of top 20 R&B record. But that's not your John Legend. Like, come on. We got to.
Right.
I worked for Clive. Like, we got to have 5 records that can compete in the top 10 of the Hot 100. And so I said, you call will.i.am, you call Swizzy, I'll call Wyclef. You know, let's call our people and make a record that's really competitive. And that's how American Boy got made. And it was dope, but Estelle correctly felt it was too pop to be a single. Meanwhile, we were waiting for Kanye to do a record for her because Kanye and John met Estelle at the same time, actually, back in LA and the Grammys, whatever. Okay. And he always said, I'll make a record for you, you know, once you have a deal. And so he was going to honor that, but he was busy. So I finally said, how about this? Instead of waiting for Ye to make a record, why don't we get him to spit 18 bars or 16 or 24, whatever, on American Boy? Because that's already a hit. It's just too pop. But if Kanye spits on it, we've solved 2 problems. We get Ye and we get this record that's already a hit. We move it and make it more hip hop. And Kanye agreed. And then I actually called my old assistant, Lesvia Castro, who was at Universal at that time doing marketing and promotions. She pulled up his schedule and said he's going to be on the ground in New York City for 48 hours or 36 hours on this date. And I said to John, yo, let's send a car to Teterboro and bring him to the studio. Estelle was already working at Platinum, Wyclef and Jerry Wonder's studio. So we brought Ye into Platinum and he came in and he dropped 48 bars on American Boy. Bananas. So we had to break it into 2 pieces. Serge Sai mixed it, killed it, won a Grammy for it. I didn't get anything for that either.
You didn't get anything. Did you get credit?
I have co-executive producer credit for the album. But again, like, you know.
But you still should, right. And you still should have a Grammy.
You know, I don't. And so, I mean, I've helped to make so many records that won Grammys. I mean, Maria, I think, won a Grammy. You know, Wyclef called me and gave me that record. You know, that I'm not even, you know, I just, you know, I did A&R. I put the record on Carlos, you know, but in records where I really contributed, I made like a significant creative contribution. Like, let's make this an entire record in the case of the Mary Met duet, or let's put Kanye on this record. Feels like maybe I should have, you know, something to show for that. But I think as women, you know, and as a woman in hip hop, and as a woman in hip hop who'd already been raped by the king of the whole game,
wow.
I was so grateful to be in the room. I was so grateful to be able to get my ideas made. By the time I was involved in American Boy with Estelle and John and Kanye, I'd been driven out of the industry by harassment, and just a very, very, very negative experience that I had at the end of my career. And I'd also already been assaulted by the king of hip hop. So at this point, you know, I'm a stay-at-home mom who's like come out of retirement to work for John Legend, and I'm just happy once again to be making records. I don't have the confidence, you know, because I'm so broken by the stuff that's happened to me to say, wait a minute, like I also should be credited here, right?
Right.
And so the trauma takes a toll because it just made me smaller. So I continue to do what I loved because I just, you know, I can't not make records. I love making records and I'm good at it, but
excellent at it.
Not able because of the trauma and because of the way I was so minimized as a woman and sexualized and objectified that I didn't have the confidence to push for the idea and then to push for myself to get credit for the idea. And I think that happens to women in a lot of industries where
absolutely
down. And so we contribute, but we don't fight for ourselves.
Right.
That was the end of my career. I really kind of disappeared from the industry after American Boy. You know, it was hard for me because I had to run into men who had been abusive And it was very hard for me to be around them. Actually, the whole Atlantic Records staff, which was the parent company for John Legend's label, were all the old Def Jam staff. So it was Julie Greenwald, it was Leor Cohen, it was Kevin Lyle, it was Mike Kaiser. It was so traumatic to be around them again, act like it was all good. Because they all knew what had happened to me at Def Jam. And it was like, you know, very painful to have to just sort of, you know, be cool with them because I wanted them to support Estelle.
Right.
But, like, make myself small in order to do that. So I just became a stay-at-home mom. I worked on a few entrepreneurial ventures, not in music, hair, this and that. And it wasn't until Me Too, to be honest with you, that I started to talk about what happened to me. And then I started to talk about what I contributed to this industry and to this culture and to hip hop. If it hadn't been Me Too, I would have taken my triumphs and my trauma to my grave. And I would have just been like a shadow of myself for the rest of my life. And I'm just so grateful that I kind of was awakened from my trance by saying so.
You know what? Let's take a break and we're going to come back. We're going to get into the whole Me Too movement. And I want to talk more about the documentary where you talk about, you know, your trauma specifically on the record. We'll be back right here on The Frequency on the Black Star Network.
On his first day in office, with the country in crisis, President Biden got to work for us. Cutting Black child poverty in half, more money for Black entrepreneurs, millions of new, good-paying jobs. He's lowered the cost of living and prescription drugs. But there's more to do. He gets it because we all deserve dignity, safety, respect, and a chance to do more than just get by, but to get ahead.
I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message.
All right, back right here on The Frequency with my guest, Drew Dixon. And we were just getting into, I just want to piggyback on what you said about your trauma making you small and walking away. And I'm going to share, with you, my story. I mean, that I don't even think I've shared publicly yet. I walked away from Pump It Up. And I walked away from Pump It Up because I didn't feel protected. I didn't feel respected. As I put on Aretha today, I did not feel that, especially after the incident. After the incident, I felt that I had to fight even harder. I had to fight for security. They didn't want to pay for it. I had to pay for my own security out of my check. I had to fight for precautions, extra precautions now. Like my whole world changed after that. So I can understand, and I definitely relate to what you're saying. And it's very unfortunate. Like, I'm so sorry you went through that, because I'm just like, I'm furious. And at the same time, we kind of intersect in that because I had a lot of dealings with Def Jam through the show. And then after the show, married to comedian Ricky Harris, who did, Def Comedy Jam in its very beginning stages. So I had a lot of dealings with Russell. So I do understand and very familiar, and had heard things, but wasn't quite sure. So what made you take a stand for yourself and decide, okay, I'm going to tell my story?
I just want to say again, though, Dee, how sorry I am for what happened to you, and that you had to pay for your own security, and that you weren't protected and respected, because I just think it's emblematic of the way Black women are not protected and respected. And our pain is just seen as something we can handle because we're magic. And we're not magic. We bleed real blood. We cry real tears.
Real tears.
And
absolutely. And we feel deeply. And I mean, especially to creative people like us, we feel very, very deeply. I mean, I do consider myself an empath, and you feel all of that type of energy.
Yes. And there's just no sense of horror even when these things happen to us. I mean, even with Megan Thee Stallion, it's like, where is the shock and the outrage? But I could talk about that for a whole entire hour and a half.
Well, we got it. Let's do it. Let's do it.
So, in answer to your question about what made me come forward,
right.
I had no intention of being part of the Me Too movement. I was really happy that the women who had come forward about Harvey Weinstein were being believed. I thought that was surprising, but refreshing as a woman who is a survivor of sexual violence. But I also thought that it was specific to these women who were white movie stars, and that because society could identify with them because they were, they checked all of the boxes of sort of the damsel in distress. That even though,
which is upsetting to me, not to cut you off, it's upsetting because the movement was started by a Black woman, Tarana Burke, for Black women and marginalized women, people, you know, women of color, for their trauma in particular. To see it, go ahead.
Went to the, I mean, right. So it's complicated because yes, Tarana absolutely started Me Too to help Black women and girls and Black, you know, survivors, period, heal. But of course, the headlines that dominated the news were, you know, the ones about women that were more identifiable as like main characters in American society because they were white movie stars or white actresses who could have been or should have been movie stars. And I don't want to take anything away from the courage of those women because Harvey was a giant. And I mean, hanging out with, you know, Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton and everybody else. So that's very brave to call him out and to put your name and face on the line to do that. And frankly, if they weren't white women, if they didn't have that degree of glamour, I don't think the Me Too movement would have gotten the attention that it got. And so it's sort of like they opened the door, you know. True. They were palatable, right? And even they have gotten tremendous blowback and haven't always been believed. And so I want to acknowledge every survivor of any racial identity, period. I see you, I feel you, I want to hold space for your pain and your healing. I also want to say, however, that when the Me Too movement started and those were the headlines, I just didn't see a place for myself in it. I didn't think anybody cared about me as a Black woman, even though I'm a not traditionally Black, you know, presenting Black woman. I'm still a Black woman. You know, I can't, you know, I don't have
when you say that, did you have to deal with colorism within the industry too?
Oh, I mean, sure. I mean, you know, I think, you know, we all deal with colorism. And so, you know, and I want to acknowledge I benefit from it. And then I'm also fetishized because of it. And I'm fetishized by, unfortunately, Black men who know that, you know, I am white adjacent in appearance, but I don't have any of the protections of Amy Cooper, who can call the police on a bird watcher in Central Park. I don't actually have a camera. Right. And so, but I also do have privilege. And frankly, I'm not sure I would have been the main subject of an HBO Max documentary if I didn't present in a certain way. And so when I finally decided to come forward to the New York Times to tell them my story, it was really off the record to tell them my story so that the women who'd already come forward about Russell Simmons would be sort of believed, because I didn't know them. But their stories were very similar to mine, which made me realize for the first time in 24 years that it wasn't just me. And I was like shocked that this was a pattern. And I realized that if I didn't say something, I was sort of enabling him. I was like an accessory.
Exactly.
So I came forward off the record. I didn't want to be named. I didn't want to be the face of it. I think his first two public, like the first two women to accuse him publicly were both white. And, you know, but that notwithstanding, I believed them because their stories were just like, there were details that I was just like, oh my God, this is, oh, he sets traps. Oh my God, this is so much like what happened to me. So I went to the New York Times off the record, and then they asked me if I would be willing to use my name because they felt that, you know, the story is obviously more credible if the person is willing to put their name beside the story. And then it occurred to me, because I was being filmed by these documentary filmmakers, just because coincidentally, the person who introduced me to Jodi Kantor, the New York Times, is a documentary filmmaker, and her husband is also a documentary filmmaker, and her husband was making a documentary about Me Too. I didn't know that.
Wow.
And it was a coincidence. I was literally talking with this woman at a parents' event about the Me Too movement. I mentioned I had a Me Too story. She introduced me to Jodi Kantor. I told her I'm actually going to go after like maybe a week or two of not wanting to talk to the New York Times. And then she connected me with her husband, who asked me if the cameras could follow me. And I said, that's fine, I guess, but I'm not signing a release, so you might have to destroy this footage because I'm not even sure I'm going to let them use my name. And that's really how I became part of this documentary. And then I realized this was an opportunity for me potentially to open the door in the same way the high-profile Harvey Weinstein survivors opened the door for me and other survivors of other abusers. I thought, well, I'm in this unique situation where they are following me around with a camera. And if I agree to do this, then this story could potentially be a portal that opens the door to tell the story of the way Black women in America have never been safe. The average Black woman in the transatlantic slave trade, she wasn't a woman. Her average age was 15 years old. And all of the Black women and girls in the transatlantic slave trade were raped. It was just to rape us. And, you know, and so I wanted to take the opportunity that I had as somebody who was suddenly being listened to broaden the scope of the discussion to focus on the vulnerability of Black women and girls that is unique in this country, where we were all raped and brutalized as a matter of business, as a matter of just common practice. And the sexualization and the objectification of Black women and girls is essentially a mythology that was used to numb everyone in society to the way we were brutalized. In the same way, hyper sexualization and the notion that Black men are inherently violent and dangerous was used to numb society into tolerating the brutality that was inflicted upon our men and our boys. Like all of these tropes had a purpose. And so that's how I entered the Me Too movement. That's why I agreed to use my name in the New York Times. And that's why I agreed to be part of the documentary. And that's how I ended up, frankly, with absolute fear and trembling and trepidation and deep just misgivings and uncertainty about coming forward, I ended up standing there and owning my own truth and finding my own power, and then unlocking the story of the rest of my career in the music industry. It all came out of that same choice that I really did with such reluctance and fear.
Wow. I have to stop and commend you and thank you for your bravery, because like I said, it inspired me to deal with my own truth. And I'm sure it inspired, you know, countless women, because I think that that's what we need sometimes, just one person to be courageous, and then we feel empowered. And I think that that's what the Me Too movement, you know, in all of its good, bad, and ugly was about. For me in particular, everything happened pre this Me Too movement. And, you know, I was young and, you know, fearless and righteous. And I was just like, this has got to stop. I mean, the same thing for me. I felt like I had to say something because I knew I wasn't the only victim of Andre Young's violence, but which is, you know, Andre Young, Dr. Dre. But I knew at the same time that if I didn't say something, because no one had pressed charges before. And so I felt like I had to, you know, take a step forward. And just like you doing that, and in the midst of it, you were doing it just because, you know, you were part of that article, but at the same time, you had no idea that you were like becoming the face of it, or the leader, so to speak. And I just want to thank you for your courage and your voice, because it was so important, and you are seen. You are being heard, and you are so loved. You know, from the countless women that I've talked to, we have nothing but the absolute respect for you, Drew. And, you know, thank you for coming forward like that. I mean, I know it took a lot. Next time on The Frequency, we finish our incredible interview with Drew Dixon. She gives us the details behind the HBO documentary that shed light on the alleged sexual assault by Russell Simmons, and tells us what's in her future. That's next on The Frequency on the Black Star Network.